A few days ago, I saw the Netflix produced live action adaptation of Death Note. This is Hardcore Geeking It Retro Review. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Major G here. And I have, I finally saw Death Note. I've been meaning to watch it for a long time, but I didn't have Netflix, of course, and so I wasn't able to really put in a review for that movie. Um, so, but I heard a lot of things about it, mostly bad. I know that a lot of people hated this movie and considered it to be one of the worst live action adaptations ever. um, and to be honest, um, sentiment like that makes me want to make a top 15 most terrible live action adaptations of anime or manga because this would not be on that list. Um, so I found the movie to be okay. It wasn't great, wasn't terrible. As it is with the majority of live action adaptations. Um, the biggest thing about it though is that it's not the Death Note you know, and if if you allow yourself to realize that, it's you can kind of go along for the ride. Um, so in that case, I feel like the biggest problem that this movie has is that it tries to tie itself to the original Death Note, mostly with the protagonist having the same name as the protagonist from the original story. Um, and um, so, and I think that's one of the reasons why it took me so long to do this was because I was trying to figure out a way where it could have been a spin-off movie, but I don't see it. I really don't see it with the way it was. Actually, yes, there is one. They could have just continued the legacy. To be honest, that would have been. But then you could. The only thing that's right. The only thing was you couldn't use L in that case if you continued the legacy. Um, or let's see. Um, L does make it to the. What was it? L does. Right. So if even if you had what's his name, Lakeith Stanfield as a successor of L, who was also named L, um, then it wouldn't. Then it would still be easy to solve because the whole premise is that they don't know how they're pulling it off. Um, and by the end of the original story, they do find out how it's being done. Um, and yeah, it's so the best thing I feel like they could have done was advertise the fact that it is a Death Note story, not necessarily the Death Note story. So that would have probably really helped it because there were a lot of similarities. There were some similarities. Some of Light's goals, not goals, sorry, not his goals. His methods. Some of his methods were a little muddled. I'm thinking specifically about the part where he starts talking about how he wants to be a god. Um, that didn't really make, in my opinion, that didn't really make much sense from where he was coming from. Um, and then of course I have if you're gonna name the character Light, you have to give him some of the attributes of Light, which he had almost none. Um, he wasn't attractive. He wasn't popular. He wasn't. Um, he was slightly smarter than your average person, but he wasn't like a genius, which is what Light was supposed to be. He wasn't a good kid. So like the problem with that is that like it was fairly obvious. It, it would have been like for L, for L, as it was in the movie, it was fairly obvious to L uh, that Light was Kira, um, as it should have been. And I'm glad they didn't make L an idiot for not realizing it, but he knew it. Uh, and I think like, I feel like the biggest obstacle there was his dad. His dad was being way too protective of him. Whereas in the original story, L was like very sure, but Light was so slippery. Like he couldn't exactly like prove get any evidence for why this person might have been for why Kira might have been Light. Um, Whereas like in the Netflix version, it was obvious. Like if you knew that Kira was a person, and well, actually that's right, Kira. That's another thing too, was that Kira actually took the blame for things, and in the which yeah. So like once again, it was one of those things where it was like painfully obvious that Kira was a kid because Kira was like wanted credit for everything. Whereas in the original story, it was everybody else who gave him the name Kira, and he didn't really take any blame. It was just a mystical force, and it was only L who was thinking this is an actual person who's doing this and not some random thing. Um, so that was another issue. Oh, yeah, so basically, he wasn't really the Light that we knew, and I think that's where a lot of people have the issue is that he really wasn't the Light that we knew. And the only hint he ever showed towards being that Light was at the very end, which was which the scene didn't 100% make sense as well. Jeez, I thought I was kind of supposed to be defending this movie. I wasn't planning. I wasn't intending to defend this movie. Because I don't think it's all that great. But I also don't think it's completely terrible. But I'm just attacking it right now. So anyway, yeah, the scene didn't completely make sense as to why he would just go ahead and why he would just go ahead and tell this whole story to somebody. But I think it was as a way to show what happened, how he was able to pull off what he did. And that was like the one time I was like, oh yeah, that is totally a Light move. But besides that, he really wasn't. He really wasn't the Light that we knew. I would say pretty much all the characters were different from what we knew them as, except for L. Lakeith Stanfield did a fantastic job playing L. And at the time that this movie came out, I didn't know who he was. And then when I went in watching it, I was just like, oh yeah, Lakeith Stanfield is playing L. Awesome. That totally makes sense. Because Lakeith Stanfield plays a lot of really weird characters. And sure enough, he was a great L. So I'm not going to fault him for that. Lakeith Stanfield was awesome in this. I feel like Light was totally miscast. The dad wasn't too bad. Mia was a little overzealous. She's not supposed to be more into the mission than Light is. She's supposed to be more into more into Light than the mission. So she's into both, but she's slightly more into Light than the mission. And it also, that's another problem too, was that there wasn't really any character development there either to show why this person would be interested in nobody like Light. In that case, it was almost. And then I think at the end they kind of showed it because it almost seemed more like a power grab than anything else. She saw power, she wanted it, which is totally different from Misa. Misa wasn't into power. So that was an interesting plot twist, and it made things different for the end. I would still say it was an enjoyable movie. I mean, it had its problems, obviously. There was another part where I feel like a lot of people might have gotten really upset. Is when Elle starts breaking down emotionally, because Elle isn't really all that emotional. But I feel like that was another plot hole too. But anyway, that's another thing where I feel like if that had actually happened to Elle in the original story, he possibly could have reacted in that direction or reacted in that way. I feel, and that's one of the main reasons I defend the Hitman movies, is because while the games are mostly stealth, the Hitman movies are just like big time action movies where he's going into rooms and killing people all at once and stuff, like completely Ramboing it up. Whereas, especially, was it in the second one? Second one, they were after him. So that was, I feel like I've played some of the Hitman games before, so I feel like it's within his. Had he been put in that situation, he would probably have done those things. And that's how I feel about Elle, is that had Elle been put in that situation in the original story, yeah, he probably would have reacted in that way. So in that case, I'm not totally off by that. I'm not totally. It was a nice surprise. It was a nice surprise to see how that happens to Elle. But I'm trying not to spoil here. I'm really trying not to spoil. I don't have a problem with Elle doing that or why he does that. I have a problem with the how, because it was so simple. It really should not have happened that way. There's no way. I feel like there's no way Light could just do that. Like, it was just like, that's way too simple. That's not supposed to happen. Like, yeah. Oh, man. Should I just go ahead and do spoilers? I think I should just go ahead and do spoilers, because movie's been out for like a couple years now. So, anyway. Spoiler time. So, anyway, yeah, when Light's talking to his dad at the end, that's what I was talking about. When Light's talking to his dad at the end, I felt like that didn't make any sense. Why would Light just go and admit all that to his dad? I also feel like Elle probably would have written his name down, which is why Ryuk was just sitting there laughing. Like, by the way, William Dafoe, of course, once again, fantastic casting. We all knew he was gonna be a great Ryuk, and he was. And oh yeah, the other thing, yeah. So, when Watari gets killed, I don't have a problem with Watari getting killed, and I don't have a problem with Elle getting super emotional and breaking down about that, because Watari was his handler for his whole life. So even though Elle's not really all that emotional during that point, I can see that happening because Watari's the only person he trusts. However, I have a problem with how Light did that, because I'm pretty sure Watari is just an alias, just like Elle is. It only makes sense. I can't believe that Light could just go and write Watari, and then he's under his control, which is like, that was kind of stupid. It was really kind of dumb. And that, I found that to be a plot hole. That was just weird. It's just like, what the heck? What? but yeah, but overall, like as long as you're not thinking about it and you're not a fan of the original story, you can enjoy it. And I do know people who have enjoyed it. So I don't think it's a bad movie overall. It's just not the Death Note we know. That's the main issue. Once again, I'm saying this once, I'm saying it a billion times. It's just not the Death Note we know. And once you get over that hump, it's not that terrible a movie. It's enjoyable. There are some plot holes, much like many movies out there, but it's not the worst adaptation out there. It's just different. And what else? Yeah. So yeah, if you're a fan of the original Death Note, I wouldn't. I would definitely not say. I would definitely recommend probably not watching this, because you'll be taken out of the story a lot by all the different changes that they've made. If you're with somebody who hasn't seen Death Note, yeah, show it to them. You can probably sit down and watch it with them. Try to shut up and not groan throughout the movie because of all the differences. But yeah, it really should be called a Death Note story or something like that. Because it's really not the Death Note story that we know. But Willem Dafoe, I mean, whether you're a fan or not, Willem Dafoe and Lakeith Stanfield were perfect casting choices. I know at first people were complaining because Lakeith is black, but he really was a good match for this role. Everybody else the dad was okay. Once again, the dad was okay, but he shouldn't have been so overprotective of his obviously Kira's son. Because I did really appreciate the part when Elle starts to break down, and he goes to their house, and this was actually kind of done by Elle, but at the same time, I feel like he was so emotionally overwhelmed that he wasn't being his usual collected, super aware self. But yeah, I really appreciated the part where he barges into the Turner house and is just like, dude, are you an idiot? Your kid is obviously Kira. Duh. That was great. That was absolutely great. Because in the original story, Elle could never do that because Light was too slick. Like there was always a what if. Like they were like Light. Oh, man, like in the original Death Note, like Light was so smart with it that like you knew he was Kira, but at the same time you're like, dang, is he actually Kira? So it was like, but in this, it's just like, of course he's freaking Kira. You know this. Everybody knows. I mean, if you know anything about what's going on, yeah, you have to notice that he's freaking Kira. And his dad was just being so overprotective that he didn't want to see it, and he didn't realize it until the end. So, which I think that never happened in the story. I think he never actually realizes it. And yeah, so this movie was okay. Not great, not terrible, just okay. Interesting story. I shouldn't say interesting. Different story. Interesting way of going about it. But definitely not. I'd have to make a list, but I don't think I would put this on a top 10 list for the worst, because it's not necessarily terrible. It's just not the same Death Note is all. So yeah. How do you guys feel about it? Did you appreciate my argument for this movie? Did I help you see it in a different light? I hope I did. No pun intended. So let me know how you guys feel in the comments. And geek on, my friends.
So the side tube version. Oh yes, one thing I think I mentioned this in my trailer reaction too. One thing that was absolutely vital to them, to the idea of Venom being his own character, is eliminating all of his Spider-Man-based abilities.